Batman! Listen, I'm not really a big superhero girl, but if there's a superhero I'll tune in for, it's gonna be Batman. Granted, when I was little, I wasn't very into comic book characters. It's more when I became a teenager and decided I wanted to get into films. At least because I was 15 and didn't really have a favorite movie. So I decided to check out a certain series that, at this point, was on cable. Yup. Listen, it's been talked about to death, and it's a series film bros love to hype up, but it was my intro to film, and I'd argue that main entry still holds up as, in my opinion, the best of any of these live-action superhero films. And I love the other two, though they are much more flawed.
We are a Scatman.
And then I watched the Keaton films and loved those too. Batman is just one of those heroes that has a lot of interesting things about him. He's been there since the beginning and thus has a lot of cheesy datedness, but there's also weird reflection in that. I mean, that's the thing. If Batman was designed to be an ideal of a certain era, what does that mean in the modern day? What does that reflect? That can be a really interesting question. And yet, it's still fun to goof around with the goofier dated Adam West side too. The point is, even when there's a bad Batman movie, it usually gives me a lot to talk about. So regardless, I'm always intrigued. Which brings us to... bring the new music back. Which brings us to The Batman, the newest take on the Caped Crusader. Coming to us from director Matt Reeves, I didn't know what to expect because I'm kinda unfamiliar with a lot of his work. I don't know, his Planet of the Apes movies are fine, I guess. And what I got from him was, well, a beautifully dripping atmosphere and tone that really engrossed me. Well, at least when I could see it. I mean, I had to see the film a second time because the first time AMC kept the lights on the entire movie. But when I could enjoy the depth of it all, I was impressed. It felt very dingy and noirish, and that's kinda something we haven't gotten before. I mean, films have certainly dove into the idea of Gotham being a den of crime, but this is the first time I feel the shots genuinely reflected the vibes of a pulp detective novel. And having Greig Fraser as a cinematographer certainly did not hurt this film's ability at creating depth. It's just a film that feels like a Rembrandt, and its world of dingy, muddy colors that drags you into it, while surrounding you with some wildly fun filmmaking tricks. I mean, it isn't the flashiest of these films in terms of what it does with the camera. It's hard to beat Burton and Nolan on that. But it genuinely felt like something I don't see a lot from these hyper-budget blockbusters. It felt like it wanted to be fresh and not fall into looking like everything else. And I really commend that. And it's aided by a fantastic score by Michael Giacchino. This is operatic in how grand it feels, reminiscent of the brave strokes of Elfman's score in '89 and just how large and gothic it sounds. It's one that reminds us of how talented Giacchino is as a composer and hopefully will make him more of the mainstream name he deserves to be. And the acting here is pretty good. Robert Pattinson really proves all the doubters wrong here by truly putting forward a fantastic Batman. He's solemn and silent, but clearly stirred. He has brilliant ocular acting, where just a look into his eyes communicates so much. Also, side note, to everyone still making Twilight jokes about Robert Pattinson, number one, are we really still acting like Twilight was some blight upon humanity in 2022? I thought we all moved on. And number two, have you not been paying attention? Not only is he now Batman, but since Twilight ended, he's gone on an amazing run of performances, becoming one of Cronenberg's favorite actors and helping add to brilliant films by the Safdies, Robert Eggers, and Claire Denis. By the way, video essay coming soon. Trust me, I had little doubt he'd pulled this off when they announced it, and I feel like I've very much been proven right there. And Jeffrey Wright is easily my pick for Best Commissioner Gordon yet. He just fits it so well in both a genuine care for doing the right thing and yet a brilliant dad energy that feels befitting of the role. Zoe Kravitz proved the racist casting directors of The Dark Knight Rises wrong with a fantastic turn as Selena Kyle that I didn't doubt for a second. She just sort of escaped into Catwoman, and I couldn't see anything else. And Paul Dano was pretty good. Though as much as I hate to admit it because Dano is one of my favorite actors and I want to give him as much credit as possible, he did overdo it in some moments with the screaming. His more quiet demeanor moments are actually by far the best acting in the film. I just wish he didn't overdo it with the wild screams at times. I also want to add there was this moment in the film where they said the Riddler had 500 followers online, like that was a huge deal. And I giggled because how am I more famous than the Riddler? I'm nobody. But then I realized, like, if you live in the DC universe, why should you care? Like, imagine you live in Metropolis and Brainiac nearly turned your city into his personal zoo, and a day later your friend goes, "Hey, you hear about the guy who tells people riddles and kills them?" Like, why the fuck would you care? So all of that sounds pretty good, right? This should be an easy pick for one of my best of the year, right? Well, no. I really enjoyed this film, but to me, there was something that held it back from being great. And truth be told, I don't know if there's a simple way to put it. The best I could put it is that this was a really fun popcorn movie, but I didn't feel much of a heart in it. Like, I enjoyed my time with it, and I'll watch it again for sure, but at the end of the day, I never quite cared about much here on a deeper emotional level. I guess to explain, the way I'd put it is that while you could pick up on some themes, especially towards the end, they aren't very substantial until that ending point. And the film does not go into much depth about the characters' emotional state themselves in any way that felt very meaningful to me. For as good of a job as the atmosphere, music, acting, everything is doing, was at the bottom of it here is just a very okay, fun Batman story that didn't make me understand Bruce all that much more, didn't get me to fear the Riddler, and didn't get me to care too much. The best way to describe my feelings on this film is to say that it's a good treat, but not a fine meal. Sometimes you want to have something fun that goes down easy in the moment, but those aren't the ones that stick with you forever. It's a fine murder mystery with a great atmosphere, but it's not occupying my thoughts like I thought it might. I wish I could have fallen in love with this like so many others. It's definitely a fun ride, and if more blockbusters are going to emulate this, I'll gladly take that stylistic boom, but at the core, I walked out of the theater feeling like I learned very little new, and most of my thoughts were just that it was missing that piece. That piece that truly hooked me. In a way, it felt a lot like the first part of a story rather than the pinnacle of it. It felt like this was more building up to the main story than it being its own completed narrative. And as such, I wonder how it'll go from here. If there's anything I can say about the narrative, it's that I hope the film learns more from the ending, whose theme felt kind of like it should have been built up more, but regardless was one of the more profound takeaways I took with me out of the theater. And the hope is, if more of the next movie can be like that, it won't be good, not great anymore. It'll be just great. But until then, Matt Reeves' The Batman gets a 7 out of 10.